The year is 1913. New York City is a symphony of steel and steam, a place where dreams are manufactured from sheer ambition. And at the apex of that ambition sat the Thorne Dynasty, a family name synonymous with railroads, shipping, and a fortune so vast it could rewrite history. The Thorne family mansion on Fifth Avenue wasn't merely a residence. It was a fortress built of marble and arrogance, lit by 1,000 electric bulbs. And yet, this story doesn't begin in the glow of that fortune. It begins in the grim, humid silence of Woodlawn Cemetery. If you visit the Thorne plot today, you will find a towering, neoclassical mausoleum, easily the most expensive piece of granite in the city. It's inscribed with the name Isabelle Thorne, 1888 to 1913. The heiress, the great beauty, the daughter who inherited it all, taken too soon by a supposed swift and tragic illness. The Thorne family held a funeral so extravagant it made the front pages of every newspaper from New York to London. Tearful eulogies were given. Tributes were paid to the girl who had shone too brightly. But here is the central, unshakable truth of this forgotten mystery. The body of Isabelle Thorne was never, ever placed in that mausoleum. The casket, polished mahogany with gold trim, was weighted down with bricks, dirt, and heavy brass. A macabre, empty shell. The Thorne family paid thousands to ensure the silence of the cemetery staff. And for 100 years, the truth has been buried not 6 feet under, but in the layers of power and deception built by the American aristocracy. The question isn't whether Isabelle Thorne is dead. The question is, why would the most powerful family in America stage her elaborate death? Was she murdered and hidden elsewhere? Or did this magnificent tomb serve as the ultimate, elaborate misdirection for an escape? Did a powerful father kill his daughter to protect his legacy? Or did a desperate heiress manage to buy her own freedom with her inheritance? Take a moment right now. Based on what you've heard, do you think Isabelle ran away, or was she murdered? Drop a quick comment with "run" or "murder" and let us know what your gut tells you. Because the man who found the truth, a young, skeptical detective, spent his life unraveling a conspiracy that began with an empty grave and ended somewhere south of the equator, proving that in the Gilded Age, sometimes the only thing money couldn't buy was the right to be forgotten. The mystery was built on a foundation of conflicting narratives, each character playing a role in the grand deception. The focal point of the entire tragedy was Isabelle "Izzy" Thorne. At 25, she was the sole surviving heir to the Thorne fortune, possessing a startling, fragile beauty and a spirit that her father had tried and failed to break. Friends remembered her as intensely artistic, spending hours sketching landscapes rather than attending society balls. She was stifled by the rigid expectations of the Gilded Age. The family ledger, later recovered, showed that in the 6 months before her supposed death, Isabelle had been making small, untraceable cash withdrawals, hundreds of dollars. Not enough to cause concern, but enough to suggest secret savings, a private fund for a private plan. She was scheduled to formally inherit the full estate on her 26th birthday, just 8 weeks after her disappearance. Her father's control was about to end, a motive that weighed heavily on all subsequent investigations. The architect of the cover-up was her father, Senator Alistair Thorne. 58, impeccably dressed, and possessing a gaze that could wither granite, Alistair saw the Thorne name as a national trust, not a family unit. He was a politician first, a father second. His greatest fear was not losing his daughter, but losing control of her inheritance, which he viewed as the lifeblood of his political career. When questioned by the press about Isabelle's sudden illness, Alistair delivered a flawless, practiced performance of grief, cementing the public narrative of a beloved daughter's untimely death. The sheer scale and speed of the funeral arrangements, all completed within 72 hours, suggested not overwhelming grief, but a ruthless efficiency to manage an inconvenient crisis. The man who risked his entire career to expose the lie was Detective Elias Finch. Young, ambitious, and deeply sensitive to contradiction, Finch was a patrolman working a dead-end beat in 1913 haunted by the local gossip surrounding the Thorne burial. Finch was drawn to the one detail the city dismissed: the lack of a death certificate from a hospital. The senator had arranged for a private doctor, long since retired, to sign off on a diagnosis of a rapid pulmonary ailment, a vague illness easily forgotten. Finch was driven not by professional ambition, but by a simple, burning injustice. He felt the weight of the lie pressing down on the soul of the city. He saw the empty mausoleum as a mocking monument to the powerless. The secret holder, the vital key to the truth, was Celia Vance. Celia was Isabelle's personal maid and confidant, a quiet woman from a poor family who had been with Isabelle since childhood. Celia's silence was purchased, not with a massive sum, but with the promise of a secure life for a family outside of the poverty of the slums. Celia knew two truths: that Isabelle was terrified of her father, and that she was preparing for two lives, the one her father saw and the one she was building in secret. She was the only person who saw Isabelle's quiet preparations: a leather trunk, a set of clothes that didn't belong in a ballroom, and a final, coded message. The case of Isabelle Thorne was dead on arrival, buried beneath the weight of Senator Thorne's power. But in 1916, 3 years after the supposed death, Detective Finch, now working in records, received an anonymous, typewritten letter. The letter contained only 5 words: "The vault is a sham." Finch knew the risk. The Thorne family was untouchable, but the simplicity of the accusation, the absolute certainty of the word sham, was impossible to ignore. Using his connections, Finch initiated the most covert and professionally suicidal investigation of his career. Finch's first act was to verify the claim. He worked through the Gravekeepers Union, finding a semi-retired worker with a gambling problem and a need for cash. For a hefty bribe, the man confirmed the impossible. The night of the funeral, he and 3 other men were paid triple wages to secure the mausoleum. Before the final sealing, they were instructed to replace the prepared casket with one weighed down with concrete, under the watchful eye of Senator Thorne's private solicitor. The worker swore he saw no body. The empty grave was confirmed. Finch's investigation escalated rapidly, moving him from a desk job into a political crossfire. He secured a warrant to investigate the fraudulent death certificate, a move that immediately triggered the fury of Senator Thorne. The confrontation was explosive. Senator Thorne summoned Finch to his Fifth Avenue study, a room lined with dark mahogany and the heavy silence of inherited power. "Detective," the senator said, not bothering to rise, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "You are investigating a closed, sensitive family matter. You are chasing the bitter gossip of drunks and gravediggers. You are a talented young man, Finch. Do not mistake ambition for madness. Your file is thin. My memory is long." The threat was clear: drop the investigation, or your career ends here. Finch, shaken but resolute, left the study with the distinct feeling that he was dealing not with a grieving father, but with a national security threat. Finch realized he needed the narrative the senator couldn't control. He needed Celia Vance. It took weeks of painstaking, quiet searching, using old servant registers and discreet inquiries. He finally found her living in a cramped but clean apartment far from the Thorne estate, working as a seamstress. Celia was terrified, but 3 years of holding the secret had broken her will. She confessed the true events of that night in 1913, meticulously reconstructing the scene. Isabelle hadn't been sick. She had been preparing to leave. She had already acquired a false passport in the name of Heiress, a traveling artist. Her final act was to collect a set of private, non-transferable family jewels, easily converted to cash, and leave a cryptic message for Celia, referencing a planned rendezvous. She wrote a note: "Detective," Celia whispered, her eyes wide with lingering fear. It was about the place where they taught her to sail. She wrote, "I will wait for the last ship at the dock where the ledger is kept." The last dock was the old abandoned Thorne and Sons shipping yard, a massive, desolate relic miles downriver, known only to family. The ledger referenced the old, physical ledger where the dock managers tracked the movements of the final ships, a ledger the senator had believed was destroyed years ago. Finch knew the senator staged the death because Isabelle was leaving. But why was the senator so concerned with her departure? The money was hers, regardless. Finch realized the senator's fear wasn't about the money being gone. It was about the scandal of the heiress abandoning her destiny. There was a political bomb buried in Isabelle's departure, and the only way to defuse it was to declare her dead. The mausoleum was the senator's shield against public shame. Finch prepared for his final, desperate move. He took a leave of absence, citing family illness, knowing that if he failed to produce a body or a killer, he would never be allowed back into the department. His journey now led to the dark, forgotten, industrial edge of the city, searching for a ghost at the place where ships once sailed to freedom. The climax began on a freezing night at the abandoned Thorne and Sons shipping yard. The docks were treacherous, rotting wood, iron cranes looming like skeletal giants, and a pervasive smell of salt and decay. Finch made his way to the old dockmaster's office, a small, dilapidated brick building the senator had neglected. Inside, the room was coated in years of soot. Finch knew the senator wouldn't have destroyed the old documents completely. He would have simply sequestered them, trusting the obscurity of the location. Finch found it in a locked safe beneath the floorboards, the heavy, leather-bound docking ledger, dated 1913. Beneath the usual logs of cargo and destination, Finch found a series of irregular, massive, handwritten entries right around the time of Isabelle's death. The entries weren't financial, they were logistical. 3 days after the funeral, a small, unmarked cargo vessel named the Serenity was scheduled for a non-stop, emergency run to Buenos Aires, Argentina. The cargo manifest contained a single, unusual item, private family art collection, fragile. But the critical entry was not in the ledger. It was the document Finch found taped beneath the safe, a sealed, private contract between Senator Thorne and his solicitor, Samuel Prescott. The contract detailed a $2.5 million cash transfer into a Swiss trust, with the payee listed as Heiress. The contract stipulated that in exchange for the full amount and lifetime security, the payee would live permanently outside of the United States and never, under any circumstances, communicate with her former identity or family. The contract confirmed that Isabelle Thorne had secured her freedom by selling her own silence to her father. The scandal the senator was trying to bury was right there in the contract's opening paragraph. Isabelle had been secretly engaged to a man beneath her station, a struggling political journalist, and, more critically, she was pregnant. A scandal that would have destroyed the senator's career and legacy. The senator didn't murder her. He orchestrated the perfect, forced disappearance and bought her freedom as a desperate act of political preservation. Finch tracked down Samuel Prescott, the now elderly solicitor, living in quiet retirement. Prescott, burdened by the secret for so long, confirmed the entire devastating truth. He admitted to organizing the cash, the false passport, the transfer to the ship, and the purchase of the empty coffin. It was not an act of murder, Detective Prescott said, his voice weary with years of complicity. It was an act of extreme control. Isabelle took the money, agreed to the terms, and sailed for a new life. She didn't want the fortune. She wanted her freedom. She traded the gold of the Thorne name for the anonymity of the world. The resolution was deeply unsatisfying. Finch had solved the greatest mystery of the Gilded Age, but there was no body, no killer, and no crime that the law could pursue. Isabelle Thorne, as a legal entity, was dead. She had chosen to become Heiress, a person who had no connection to the empty mausoleum. Finch presented his findings to the police commissioner. The scandal was too immense, the senator too powerful, and the proof, a secret contract detailing a voluntary exit, too politically flammable. The case was quietly closed with a footnote. Original findings confirmed. Case remains administratively closed. Finch's investigation was buried, and he was reassigned to a remote precinct for his overzealous behavior. The case of the forgotten heiress remains the perfect encapsulation of the Gilded Age's central lie. Senator Alistair Thorne didn't need to commit murder. He simply used the only tool he truly possessed, his wealth, transformed into absolute power. He bought silence, he bought a doctor, he bought a gravekeeper, and most decisively, he bought his daughter's future. He replaced his living heir with a granite lie, ensuring his reputation and his fortune remained untouchable. Detective Elias Finch, ruined by the sheer truth of his discovery, always believed he failed. But the evidence he uncovered tells a different story. Isabelle Thorne was not a victim in the final act. She was a survivor who chose self-exile over suffocation. She saw the mausoleum her father built and knew it was the perfect metaphor for her life in New York. Magnificent, cold, and utterly empty. In the end, the empty grave was not a sign of a body hidden nearby, but a sign of a life finally lived far away. We do not know what became of Alara Hayes in Argentina. Did she find happiness? Did she raise her child? What we do know is that every time the sun sets over Woodlawn Cemetery, it casts a long, lonely shadow over that towering mausoleum. And that shadow is a haunting reminder that some people are so powerful they can erase reality itself, replacing a beating heart with a handful of bricks, all to protect the illusion of a perfect name. This was Trace Crime Files. Subscribe for more stories where truth is stranger than fiction, and justice is never as simple as it seems.